Hello, do let me know if I am coming through to you from home here in York. Hopefully I will pop up very shortly. As you see, the chat on a big monitor tonight, so it's a bit easier to see everything going on. So hopefully somebody, often Catherine. Hello, Catherine, always first to the post there with hi John. So good evening, welcome everybody. Say some hellos. So Susan's on, Leslie, Robin I've seen, Tish. Hello, Leslie. Linda from New York is with us, and Roy Lynn, and Deirdre, I think I saw. Hi, Dawn. So as long, just sort of let me know before we get started. Is this kind of volume about right? I've got the microphone set up at distance, so let's just give me a bit of feedback on the volumes. New room. Well, it's the top room, our house that was gradually being turned into, kind of creative studio office, however you want to describe it, for me. So I'm no longer, hello Laurie, I'm no longer having to squat out in my wife's, Mrs. T's office to do this, which is great because it means it's a bit warmer on an evening, which is nice. Volume's good, thank you for that, Leslie and Dawn. Always good to get these things sorted out at the start, because we're bound to mess up, because it always happens on these presentations. But anyway, thank you all. Just a reminder then, obviously I was in Saltaire a couple of weeks back, and was it a week and a half, thereabouts, and I'd been the weekend previously and tested it all fine, and then come the day the 4G signal was very patchy. So consequently, I thought, well, as I'm here, we'll do the next best thing. So shot an hour of video, which we're going to go through, and I'll use the text I would have used within the live commentary. Had the 4G been sufficient for us on the day? The nice thing, of course, is this is shot in 4K, not 4G rather, so a bit better, hopefully, in terms of visual. And I hope you enjoy it. It is I think, a very visual tour. And if you're not aware of it, or kind of how it fits into, obviously, Bradford and Yorkshire history, but also the kind of the broader industrial development narrative, I think you'll find quite interesting. So, without further ado, if we are all strapped in, I will get a sip of my coffee, and we will roll VT. So just bear with me one moment. So, have I said hello to everybody? I think I've said hello to most of them. Let's just quickly do a last hellos. Anybody I've missed? Tish, hi, good to see you. I'm sure I'll see you pop up along the way. So do keep chatting, lob in any questions that you may have. Otherwise, sit back and enjoy Saltaire. So just bear with me 1 second, and we'll get organised, and hopefully you can now see the video. So welcome to the second of our tours, focusing on Bradford to celebrate the UK City of Culture 2025. So our first visit a couple of weeks ago took us to the urban centre to discover the architectural legacy of a city of textiles, and also to hear about the men and the women who created and laboured in the industry. So today we continue our story, but in a kind of very different setting, on the banks of the River Aire, some 3 miles to the north of the city. And it is the story of Sir Titus Salt and a landmark industrial community that he created here. During the early 19th century, Titus Salt achieved great success in the textile industry in the growing Yorkshire town of Bradford. And by the middle of the century, Bradford had become a hugely overcrowded and insanitary location. So Titus decided to create a whole new industrial site away from the city. He not only built one of the largest mills in the world at the time, but also a whole model village, a community of houses, shops and public buildings for his workforce and their families. The site he chose was here, by the banks of the River Aire, and he was obviously so impressed with it, he decided to, in the Wild Hills, decided to kind of give his name to the place, and so the banks of the River Aire, this place near Shipley, becomes Saltaire. So he wedded his name to it and became Saltaire. So the first sign we've got, if you like, of this kind of model community kind of coming into being here is The first step into a site and panning across it is we're here at the cricket club. And this was founded in kind of 1869, so it was very much during Salt's lifetime, and he was very interested in what we're going to discuss, giving people sort of honest pleasures to be involved with, that driven by his own very strong Christianity, his Christian zeal, if you like. He wanted people to find positive outlets for their energy. He believed in creating good housing, good education systems, good social facilities, and so forth. So the cricket club and Roberts Park, we'll talk about in just a moment, is very much an expression of that. And what's fascinating about Saltaire is it's like a philosophy turned into a built environment. So this is a man saying, I want to create, I can't necessarily change the world, but I can create something better, and I can treat people better, and I can do better as a result, the golden circle, if you like, of capitalism. So sort of stepping back a bit then, Titus Salt was born in Morley, near Leeds, in 1803, into a kind of lower middle class background. And he first served an apprenticeship with a wool stapler in Wakefield. Now, wool stapling is basically sorting out the different grades, different lengths. If you've got wool from different animals, you kind of bundle that up. So basically, it's kind of sorting to pre-sale and pre-use. So they sort of sort and grade wool. But he moved to Bradford around 1820 with his father. And this sort of took him away from the staple end of the business. So he was apprenticed now into a firm called William Rouse and Son, and he spent 2 years kind of getting a broad insight into textile manufacture. And Titus's father Daniel established himself in business as a wool stapler in Bradford, and in 1824 Titus joined his father's wool stapling business, and the company became known as Daniel Salt and Son. And this expanded to incorporate a spinning business in 1834. So by the 1830s, the sort of just time parallel right at the beginning of Queen Victoria's reign, Bradford had become a kind of magnet for people seeking work or business opportunities, and it experienced a population growth of 78% in just 30 years. So this is due to rapid industrialisation of the processes required to convert raw wool into manufactured cloth. But of course, it's also about the human manpower that's required to produce on this industrial scale. So Bradford becomes kind of foul and overcrowded. Now, many new mills kind of increased the levels of untreated industrial waste, and there were high levels of poverty and lawlessness. In 1835, Titus Salt set up on his own in business. He'd already made extensive use of what's known as Donskoy wool from Eastern Europe, and he'd begun to sort of experiment with other fibres to basically get competitive advantages, you might say. And his kind of real breakthrough came with alpaca. He sort of came across a selection, if you like, a sample of alpaca wool in 1834, and he took it away and he worked with it over 3 years. He basically came up with a technique where he found that using alpaca as the weft and the cotton as the warp, he could produce a kind of durable, light, lustrous cloth at a kind of reasonable cost, nice and hard wearing. And so he becomes the first man in Bradford to be able to kind of offer this particular fabric, and it becomes hugely popular. And so he did extraordinarily well. And by 1850, he had enormous success in business. But unlike many of his fellow industrialists, he didn't choose to buy a landed estate. Instead, influenced by the poor living conditions of workers in Bradford, his religious beliefs, and it is said he put into practice to provide work also for his 5 remaining sons. So he decided he's going to build this grand new mill in rural surroundings and create an industrial community which he was to name Saltaire. So obviously we're seeing now the statue of Titus Salt. Interestingly, when you look, you will see that the mill, the town, is behind him. In his hand, he has a rolled up plan of some description, and he's kind of looking outwards. So he's kind of looking to the future. I think that's the kind of the way he's been sought to be portrayed. He's not turning his back on Saltaire, meaning kind of going what's next on his kind of crusade to create a sort of better world. So he obviously cornered the advantage in alpaca. We're going to see another statue's alpaca at the bottom, and it's lovely cloth. I mean, it's great. You can see how in the 1850s, they were producing vast quantities of this stuff. So this statue, by the way, obviously erected after his death, was done by his successor, a chap called James Roberts, who came to own the mill of the complex and obviously named the park, but actually named it after his son, who was horrendously, I think 3 of his sons had died and 1 came back horrendously injured. His name was Bertram. So Bertram, it should really be called Bertram's Park really, but it's called Roberts Park. It's named after Bertram Roberts. But that statue was put up to commemorate the 50-year anniversary of Salt's death, and the opening of the 100th year of his birth and the 50th year of the opening of the textile factory. So you get a sense here of the kind of comparatively kind of lowland setting that Saltaire is. Most of the valleys around here wouldn't allow you to create architecture like this because they'd be too sort of V-shaped, if you like. But Saltaire is a relatively kind of flat plain by the banks of the River Aire. So Titus purchased this land to the west of Shipley from 8 different owners to build the new mill and the community. And the area was adjacent to the Leeds-Liverpool Canal and the railway, so its raw materials and finished goods could be transported with ease. And the architects that he used were Lockwood and Mawson. You probably remember them, who transformed Bradford City Centre. Now, we'll just come back to them in a minute. We'll just talk about these guns here, because this is a pair of 68-pounder guns. And the 68-pounders are genuine, but actually they weren't used in combat. They were at the works, the ironworks in Bradford that had made these guns, I think from 1847 onwards. And this became the kind of weapon of mass destruction for the British Army and the British Navy, their kind of go-to heavy piece of weaponry. These were never used in combat, they were used as samples back at the factory. But they've been placed there fairly recently in a kind of homage to the fact that Titus Salt had a pair of his own on his estate. And so consequently, actually, his were of better provenance. They were said to have been used in the Battle of Trafalgar. So there's no such claim to fame of these guns themselves, but nonetheless, they are part now of this kind of presentation of Titus Salt, who quite literally, in Italian vernacular, of course, was the big shot, the Pezzone Avanti. The guy that kind of created it all. So he's very resplendent, stood there with a beautiful bandstand, kind of surrounded. Everything is a delight. It's a really wonderful kind of park to walk through and to experience. Where it was 1812, certainly a Tchaikovsky concert wouldn't be complete with that cannon fire. So the guys who transformed Bradford City Centre are now put to work to design the exterior of Salt's Mill in kind of Italian style. And Salt's Mill, which we're going to have a look at shortly, and then for much of the rest of the tour, was designed as what they call a vertical mill. So basically it's working upwards, taking in raw materials, scouring and washing. So of course raw materials in this case would be sheep fleeces, needed cleaning and washing, combing, drawing, spinning, weaving, designing and finishing into kind of high quality cloths. There's a lot of stages, so you're kind of heavily demarked in its design to create productive spaces where these individual kind of elements of the production process could be kind of carried out. And in its heyday, get this right, its 3,000 workers could produce 30,000 yards of cloth every working day. 30,000 yards of cloth. So this hopefully is giving you an idea of the kind of the setting, the kind of parkland setting, the statue of the alpacas there, we'll have a look at in a moment, relating again back to our his kind of fascination with alpaca wool, but also achieving a competitive advantage through making this, what do you call it when you put 2 textiles together? It'll come to me, but basically it's a combination, isn't it? Of using cotton and alpaca, or cotton wool and alpaca. So they're very cute. These statues. I'm not sure how long they've been there. I think fairly recent addition, but very nice, of course. And who can resist a smiley face of an alpaca? So that's, and basically when he'd sort of done his sort of trials, he kept needing more and more. So he secretly bought a consortium. He found some in a warehouse somewhere, and nobody else could find a use for it. They felt it was useless. as a kind of commercial prospect. But just over here, just before we kind of go on, just have a look at the architecture and this kind of investment in quality. You'll see a little TS in a minute, of course, for Titus Salt. This originally was in Salts Park before it was renamed in honour of James Robert's son. But a TS there. See, everything is kind of beautifully finished, and that's going to be, kind of theme as you're going to see across. And perhaps that celebratory element of the sheer mastery of the architecture here, was a deliberate birthday present for Salt, because the mill opened on the 20th of September 1853, which was Titus Salt's 50th birthday. And shortly after the celebrations, work commenced on the industrial community of Saltaire. So hopefully you're all keeping up. It's all kind of making sense. You are engaged in the story. Llamas and alpacas, easy mistake to make. Horror movies. I don't know about that. I'm not seeing that one. Cole, but you are very welcome to join us and be in the chat today. So it's said that we talked on the last tour, when Colonel Ackroyd, who had founded the Penny Bank and Ackroyd's Mills, Lister Mills over in the main city, when he died, 10,000 were said to kind of line the path. Well, it's said, believe it or not, when the funeral remains of Sir Titus Salt were carried to his resting place here in Saltaire, it's estimated 100,000 people turned out to pay their last respects. Now, he was living at the time in Lightcliffe, which is near between sort of Brighouse and Halifax, I think. And I believe it's about 12 miles. So it's a fairly long route, but nonetheless 100,000 I think goes a long way to obviously show how people wish to kind of pay their respects to it. And as we said, you've got Titus Salt that you'd think fittingly would be looking out across his estate, but so focused is he on the future that he's kind of pointing his back to it. Right, okay, so we're coming up now to just in terms of just thinking about Salt then, he is a man driven by a kind of campaigning Christian spirit, and he created his own little slice of heaven here in this shallow valley lying just 3 miles from Bradford, and in doing so created an enormous contrast from the urban working and the living conditions of the urban working classes, many of whom, as we've heard, had immigrated, had arrived into Bradford looking for full-time, secure, year-round work. Of course, by contrast, thinking in the 1830s to an agricultural economy, that work wasn't necessarily secure all year round. And of course, as time goes on, the other benefit is Titus Salt is also offering accommodation. It makes it pretty easy to find your staff. So we'll come back to that sort of thing. But as I say, most of all, it's important to kind of note he's driven by a campaigning Christian spirit, and he creates this place as a kind of response, the antidote to urban conditions. So the estate, by the way, remains almost entirely intact, and we'll have a good walk around it today. And that statue, as I say, was put up to commemorate the 100th anniversary of his birth. So we're going to talk about the life and work legacy of Sir Titus Salt in the industrial age on this tour, and take in as much of the visuals as we can. So we're looking now at New Mill. So New Mill is the second of the mills that was kind of put in place. The park had been laid out in 1871, and not too long afterwards, New Mill emerged as the second mill on this site. So I've lost my pace in my notes there. So in Bradford, Salt is emerging as a strong kind of productive figure. He's starting to get involved in politics, but his politics are largely about the stuff that appertains or is in support of furthering his ambitions here at Saltaire. He doesn't really seek to get too involved in so much else. I mean, he does become the MP for Bradford for a relatively brief period, about 18 months, until health forces him to kind of step down from that. And this is by the boathouse, originally bought is a kind of leisure facility for a kind of big house by the river, but has been a pub for I think most of the 20th century. It flooded, by the way, as York did on Boxing Day 2016. I think it should for about 7 months. So we're crossing over, obviously, the River Aire, and we're coming in towards the sort of mill complex and the village and everything. So, as I say, people had moved from pretty small townships, mainly villages, where they probably had strong communal roots, strong familial roots, and now they're looking to obviously set up in the urban cities, um, and so consequently, their kind of lifestyle sort of changes. So housing is part of that kind of mix. Um, so these townships in and around Bradford had kind of grown up, but they'd kind of grown too fast, and so there was no infrastructure, there was no kind of support services for them. People were just basically, the poorer you were, basically that's adequate. Any of your housing or kind of social needs would be made. So basically, what he was kind of setting out to do here was not only to create places of work, but also places of community that could support a workforce. And let's be honest, obviously, it's very handy having a workforce on the doorstep. There are very, very limited commuting costs. So now we're on to the Leeds-Liverpool Canal. So across the River Aire, and you now see running pretty much parallel to it, is the Leeds-Liverpool Canal, which runs right the way in between the two textile mills, which of course was then ideally placed for both raw materials and finished goods coming in and out. So it's very, very kind of well connected in terms of location. You've got the railway just on the other side as well. This is the site that he chose. And I think, as well as we mentioned previously on the last tour, there'd been this social change that for centuries the wool trade, the textile trade of West Yorkshire, had been very much a cottage industry. Both Halifax and Bradford, their piece halls, where people would literally bring the pieces of fabric to kind of join together to do the sort of the full rolls and so forth, and to be sold. So this was a step up. It was a change. It was moving from working in homes, in the cottage, with kind of children around you, the spinning wheel or whatever other function you were doing, carding, whatever you were doing in the process of manufacture, to moving now to work in these big light-filled sheds of the textile factories. So it's huge social change for people. It's kind of new way of working. It's new forms of employment. So it's creating a new urban working class where normally they would expect life to be hard, work was short. So consequently, alongside the growth of the kind of textile industries, as we talked upon, in Bradford you get the beginnings of the growth of worker representation, cooperative societies, trade unions, and all these kind of things are kind of coming up. So it's that period where the kind of burgeoning emergence of an industrial economy. Now, this is one of the kind of first buildings we're looking at kind of on the estate, and this was the stables block. So you can imagine when this was built originally in the 1850s, horses were still the kind of the main form of kind of vehicle transportation. If you go down there, you can see the buildings. I'm not going to go down there because people live there, but as we come around and see the church, you'll see the rear, very cute, or pretty front aspect, really, I should say, of those properties. And so we've now got the we'll have the new mill. Which, as I say, that was also built by Lockwood and Mawson, incorporates the dye house for colouring. And of course, the many lights in these buildings was to bring as much lighting as possible, of course. So, Lockwood and Mawson, the architects, were basically commissioned with creating a community where the workforce would be healthier, happier, and more productive. So work begins in 1851 and continues until 1876. And Salt's Mill became a vast and ultra-effective textile factory. It's very beautiful. This is the kind of the front gate, that's what's known as the mill building. It's the kind of the way in. And this was the first building to be complete in 1853. So Lockwood and Mawson designed the entire village in a classical style inspired by Italian Renaissance. Their finest work we're going to see in a minute is the Congregational Church, now the United Reformed Church, and that's set in spacious landscape garden. And its ornamental bell tower can be seen in views throughout the village. It is like a stately home. I mean, the whole thing has been constructed along that basis. So I say the first building we saw was the stables, and following that we were looking at the entry building to the estate complex, as you might say. So you can see it's all kind of very close together. We've come across from the park. We've seen the first shot of the tower of the church, that incredibly grand tower. So when Titus Salt, a kind of devoted member of the congregational church inspired by Calvinism, commenced the design and construction of his model village at Saltaire, a congregational church was the first building he commissioned. So Salt donated the land himself and paid for the cost of the church. This is the other side of... They'd have been ostlers, wouldn't they? People that were working with the horses. Some of them would have been drivers as well. So some looking after the horse, or maybe combining both. But that was the job they did. So this is the first public building commissioned. He donated the land and paid for the cost. At the time, 16,000, which we think is about a shade over 2.5 million in today's money. And it was designed, as was the kind of rest of Saltaire, by this Bradford-based architect partnership of Lockwood and Mawson in this Italian classical style, which I hope you find very attractive. I think it's fabulous to look at. The foundation stone was laid by Caroline Salt, who's a wife of Titus, in 1856, and the church opened in 1859. And as you kind of come round the side of the building, the south side of the nave, inside you've got the Salt family mausoleum, where Sir Titus Salt was buried in 1877. So, in kind of creating his slice of heaven in West Yorkshire, Salt did not omit his final resting place in its heart. And now that there was obviously a church, obviously a quick look at the war memorial. We always like to, on these tours, take a moment to pause, and it's a particularly nice one. This one, it's got a verse by, I can't think who it's by. Excuse me, some of you I'm sure will know, "The greater love hath no man." Here we go. So greater love hath no man than to lay down his life for his friends. So obviously very much in the kind of patriotic spirit of the Great War. But let's take a minute just to have a look at some of these names. There isn't a single village or community, of course. Well, I think there's 3 in total across England that don't have some kind of war memorial. So that is obviously the legacy of that war. So you can see what a beautiful setting this church is. I mean, it really is absolutely glorious. I'd say now that he'd sort of got on and he'd erected the church, he'd created his own final resting place, which is pretty awesome. The real work could kind of begin. But when it came to the life of kind of bringing his vision to healthy homes alongside the state-of-the-art textile mills, there's of course a couple of reasons for commissioning it in this way. So I'm just going to see if I can just reduce that down a little bit. Let's see. I'm just trying to get an optimal. I'll just pause the video just for a minute, and then we'll kind of come back. It's awkward because I've got all the chat and various things in the window, so hopefully. Talk amongst yourselves. I do apologise about this. I should be with you in just a moment, I hope. Now then, hopefully that is better. I'll just leave that there for a second. So hopefully that is now centred, and I'll just give you a second to catch up. Okay, so let's. So obviously we're looking at the rear. My apologies. So if I've just only been half the image. Oh dear. Oh dear. Oh well, let's. I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll carry on with the talk, and then I'll re-edit the video as it goes up onto YouTube and play it this way, so that hopefully we can do that together. Still very zoomed in. I mean, that's the best. I think that I'm zooming in and out at the moment, so I was just trying to show you some of the details. So just hold that thought just for a minute, just until we kind of get started again. So again, I've just zoomed in then rather than it changing. So again, I'm just trying to show detail. Walking away now, we should be zooming out. So hopefully that will have resolved itself. Can someone let me know, are you now getting something approximating full views? Okay, I'm not seeing anything, but I think we've got ourselves around that, have we? Somebody just make a comment, if you would. Ah, good, thank you, Dawn. Right, okay, so, good, I'm glad it looks normal. So as I say, what I'll do is I'll drop in the front end of that video. It's about 26 minutes, I'll take a note of that. And when I upload it onto YouTube, I'll keep this talk, but you can have the first 26 minutes of the video. Good. Sorry about that. Right. So as we're coming obviously out of the Congregational Church. So as I say, this was the first kind of statement of intent really by Titus Salt, obviously, and his designers. You see the narrowboat down there on the river. So as I say, in case you couldn't see it before, you've got the Liverpool Canal, Leeds Liverpool Canal over on that side. Sitting alongside, adjacent to the mills, so obviously very much geared up to using that to move raw materials and finished goods. So after the church has been built, so that's our kind of last look at the church. So hopefully you enjoy. Pretty special. It's a pretty impressive church, as we said. We're going to go on and have a look at as much of the rest of the village as we can. So just going back to this sort of thinking about why you would design a factory but then also build a community around it. I'm not for a second going to question his what's the word I'm looking for? His altruism, but it kind of makes common sense, and that's kind of an important thing. So you've kind of got a practical requirement insofar as that if you build people places to live, you've got a permanent pool of labour near to the mills. And this is also coupled with what I believe is a genuine belief that healthy and contented workers are more productive. So this isn't in any way to sort of belittle the purely philanthropic aims of people like Ackroyd and Crossley from Bradford and Halifax, and obviously Saltaire from Saltaire. They were genuine in their beliefs, but it just made good sense. So we're now at the mill building, and this public space opened in 1854. It's directly opposite the mill, and it was a dining hall. So it's known today as the Mill Building and a part of Shipley College. And the main purpose was to provide meals for the mill workers, but until the other public amenities were built, it acted as the kind of main social, educational and religious space for several years. From 1854 until 1859, religious services and a Sunday school were held in the hall, and it also provided space for societies and meetings, including the Saltaire Literary Society. The factory school established in the dining hall was thought important by national visitors and felt to be superior to many that had arisen in other factories and mills. So children aged 8 to 13 years of age were educated in the dining hall, and they were known as half-timers in the mill. So we're now seeing kind of a third of these kind of transport links we've had to the River Aire, the Leeds Liverpool Canal, you're now seeing the Midland Railway. So this main thoroughfare of Saltaire we're on is predicted to be named Victoria Road, of course in honour of the Queen, who was at that time overseeing Britain's rise to the very top of the League of Industrialised Nations. However, in its wake, particularly in the urban centres, the workers who were creating this wealth lived in unimaginable filth and squalor. So Salt decided there had to be a better way to share the wealth that was being created. So his vision was not simply for a place to house his workers. He wanted to nourish and stimulate them to want better lives and to embrace Christianity. Now, this bar here is named Don't Tell Titus, and it's a lovely little play on what is actually an erroneous belief that the Titus Salt was strictly anti-alcohol, part of the temperature movement. Actually, Titus Salt drank, and he had no problem with the workers drinking elsewhere. He just didn't want a bar in his village. So consequently, the Dotel Titus, he wouldn't have tolerated that being open in his day, but he wasn't against a nice glass of red wine. But what he wants is them to embrace Christianity. So walking up Victoria Road, and the next of the civic buildings, you can just see the tower there in the background. This is the Saltaire Institute, or the Victoria Hall. And the very first report of the dining hall being used for a public event was on November the 3rd, 1854, reported as the inauguration of the Saltaire Literary Institute. And the purpose of the Saltaire Literary Institute was to provide a library, a reading room with newspapers and periodicals, and a programme of lectures. In 1869, these activities moved into a purpose-built, grand new building erected opposite the new schools. And that was named the Saltaire Institute, the building you're looking at now, known today as Victoria Hall. Opening in 1871, it was one of the final pieces to complete Salt's vision of a model village, providing many indoor leisure spaces. The Institute was intended to provide a social gathering space for residents, rather than meeting in the pub, as an educational institute. And although not part of the temperance movement, Salt was staunchly opposed to the construction of a public house in his village, having seen many workers in Bradford drink their wages away as soon as they were paid, and to fail to provide their families. So residents were free to drink at home or in pubs outside the village, but Salt hoped they'd be attracted by the more immediate social club and institute. And in a printed circular addressed to the people of Saltaire in May 1870, Titus Jr., his son, explained that his father's purpose in creating this multi-purpose building was to provide a social club and an educational institute to supply the advantages of a public house without its evils, and that the provisions of the Saltaire Institute were to be for the innocent and intelligent recreation, including a reading room, a library, a chess and draughts room, a smoking room, a billiard room, a bagatelle room, a lecture hall seating 600 people, theatre lectures for 150 people, a science laboratory, a school of art, various classrooms, a curator's house, a gymnasium, and rifle drill rooms, so rifle as in for shooting practice. Looking across the Salt building on Victoria Road, opened in 1868 as the location for the factory school. It was associated again with the Salts Mill, but before this the factory school was hosted in the dining hall that we saw a little bit further down the road, so that's now part of Shipley College. And there were both day scholars and half-timers who would work at the mill for half a day and attend school for the other half. Boys entered on the right and girls on the left, and the school was designed to cater for 750 children initially. In 1874 there were 806 half-timers and 454 day scholars, with an average attendance of 665. And the schools were constructed with state-of-the-art technology, hot water central heating, gas lighting, and tip-up lavatories. In 1878, the school moved to the newly built Albert Road Board School, today known as Saltaire Primary School, and the Victoria Road building became the Salt High School, catering for both girls and boys. That's the building across the road. So outside the building, as we saw there, Victoria Hall, there's two lions and two more on the opposite sides of the road, and their names can be just made out, inscribed in their pedestals. They're known as Peace, War, Vigilance, and Determination. And local legend has it these were originally constructed for Nelson's Column in Trafalgar Square. This is, unfortunately, almost certainly a myth. So continuing upwards now on Victoria Road, we're crossing over in a minute the junction with Saltaire Road, and we're going to be looking at the hospital, the next of the buildings of interest. So in February of 1867, notices were placed in local newspapers by architect Lockwood and Mawson for the contracts for the erection of school buildings, 59 dwellings, a shop, and the erection of 45 almshouses and a dispensary, with enclosures complete. The dispensary is what would become the infirmary, as a Titus Salts Hospital is the building we're looking at now. So the Titus Salts Hospital was opened in September of 1868, providing crucial medical help many decades before the foundation of the National Health Service. So despite efforts to reduce the dangers of millwork, injuries were still commonplace. But with the existence of a hospital and dispensary so close at hand, accidents and illness could be dealt with promptly. The original hospital was 2 stories high and had 9 beds. The third floor was added in 1908 to 1909, making it able to provide 17 beds. During 1926 and 27, the hospital was further extended to accommodate a further 30 beds. So facing it on the west side, as we're going to kind of walk up further up the road, we're going to see first of all obviously the again fabulous wealth of design features integrated into the building. This is no mean kind of simple functional building. Every effort has been made to continue the stylish architectural presentation and the kind of coherence, making it all fit very well together. And so on the opposite side to here, on the west side, we've got a kind of asymmetrical road which is going to pan out in a minute, and we'll look out across the other side, to the right hand side, set back a row of almshouses. So almshouses, of course, are property, social housing you'd call it today, that are being I'll just turn the media source down if that's a bit too loud. I can't hear it, so I'll just turn that down a little bit. So hopefully that's helped with that. And so as we kind of cross over onto the other side, you will see the almshouses. So as I say, they're all built under the kind of same architectural guise, architectural style. You see here they're sat back with the kind of green in front of them. So we'll kind of cross the road, thank you Julie, to have a look over there. And I took the camera all the way down here. I don't think you need it on. I'll tell you what I'll do, we'll just turn it right down, and then hopefully it's just in the background rather than getting in the way of the vocal. As ever, because I can't necessarily hear what you can hear and hear me, but I can't hear how it's going out through YouTube. It's often helped just to get a bit of feedback there. So thank you for that. So these are almshouses. I'll show you about the tatty sofa there, but other than that, it's very beautiful. So provided for people that had no other means of support for themselves. And it's kind of asymmetrical U-shape around Alexandra Square, which is kind of one of the very few open areas in the village. It was never designed to be an informal recreation area, but for the enjoyment of the almshouses resident. And there were originally 45 almshouses in this construction. Each had their own oven, boiler, and pantry, together with a single bedroom. And 41 of the properties remain, as 4 were absorbed into the expansion of the hospital, infirmary, and distillery. So 41 remain of that 45. And the occupants were selected by Titus Salt in his lifetime, and subsequently by a board of trustees. And the occupants were chosen on the basis of their age and infirmity, and could live there rent-free. They also received a small weekly pension. There were many candidates due to the hazardous nature of working in a textile mill. Let's get a drink. Good, I'm glad that's settled down. That balance between what we call that ambient sound and so just going back to the hospital, obviously there's a lot of dangers. One of the biggest hazards in the textile factories obviously was exposure to cotton dust, breathing it all in, and of course over a prolonged period that can lead to a condition called byssinosis or brown lung disease, and kind of chronic respiratory illness caused by the inflammation and scarring of lung tissue, caused by basically prolonged exposure to cotton dust rather, leads to difficulty breathing, chronic coughing, and in severe cases permanent lung damage. Another big hazard in textile factories was the risk of injury from operating heavy machinery, of course. And the early textile mills were equipped with large, complex machines, such as looms, spinning frames, and carding machines, which were often poorly designed with little regard for worker safety, unfortunately. So common injuries, obviously, at this time included crushed fingers and limbs, with workers, of many of them children in this early industrial era, would often have to insert their hands into the machines to fix jams or to adjust threads, and without proper safeguards or stop mechanisms, it was easy for hands or limbs to become trapped. So leading to crushed bones, amputations, and other serious injuries. So pretty nasty. Another problem is scalping, hair entanglements. Hair could get easily caught in machinery, pulling workers towards the moving parts. In some cases, workers suffered severe scalp injuries or even killed as a result of being entangled. And of course, other fatal accidents. Many workers, particularly those tasked with cleaning machines, often worked close to moving parts. And in fact, where safety protocols were either lacking or non-existent, it was not uncommon for workers being maimed or killed due to malfunctioning or improperly maintained machinery. So we're turning now down Titus Street. So we're going to start to see the namings. They're all named after members of his family. So upon the completion of the housing, workers were brought in by special train each day, or rather prior to it rather. The houses were built by Lockwood and Mawson between 1854 and 1868, and they're a fine example of 19th century kind of hierarchical workers' homes. So as long as you could afford the rent, you could live where you want. There wasn't a kind of sense that if you're a certain grade you lived on this street, but mostly they were small kind of two-bedroom properties. Where you see, if you sort of see the line of the roofs, then you sort of see a higher building, a third story. This was to accommodate single people, so a sort of suite of rooms, as you might say, and it kind of it creates dedicated space for the single people, but also kind of breaks up the architectural line, so it kind of gives architectural interest. So the residential area covers just over 25 acres and eventually consists of 21 streets, 2 roads, 2 terraces, and 4 places. 850 residences of various sizes were built, and numerous shops completed the model village. So there you see George Street, one of Titus's brothers, I believe. So the houses varied in size from 2-bedroom dwellings to those with 7 bedrooms. So again, you're getting a nice sight there over the valley. We saw the church tower. And as I say, it's unusual insofar as it's a grid pattern. Most of the topography, the landscape of West Yorkshire wouldn't allow this. You simply wouldn't have enough width, but because this is a kind of low, shallow, presumably glacial valley. It is possible to kind of build like this. So it is very unusual, this industrial landscape. It's not surprising it's got this UNESCO award. So Ada, again, one of Titus's sisters. So how cute to name all the streets after your kids. He ends up with 11 kids, so it's a lot of streets to name. But these are much, much better than the working class houses in nearby Bradford and Shipley. You've got a proper system of drainage, water and gas was supplied to every house, and each had at least a backyard and private lavatory. And the streets were built to be open-ended, letting the sun and air, and a number of shops were included in the new streets, and at all levels the housing compared favourably with housing in Bradford. They supplied with gas directly to each home from the mill, cheaper than that available locally. Initially, water was also supplied directly by the mill. Each house had its own lavatory in the yard, and the streets had been laid out and drained before the houses were built. So the street names acknowledge members of the Salt family, the royal family, and the architects of the village. So we have Victoria Road, Albert Road, and Albert Terrace, named after the Queen Victoria and her consort Albert. And then Titus Salt, who'd married Karen Whitlam in 1830, were going to have 11 children. And in creating his new community, he didn't look far for inspiration. So Caroline Street was named after his wife. Titus, William Henry, George, Amelia, Edward, Fanny, Herbert, Whitlam, Mary, Helen, Ada Streets were named after his sons and daughters. Catherine, Jane and Duff Street were named after his daughters-in-law. Gordon Terrace, Shirley Street and Harrod Place named after his grandsons. And Constance Street was named after his granddaughter. So he definitely kept it in the family, but isn't there just beautifully maintained? I mean, as I say, this was awarded a kind of UNESCO heritage site. This is a site of kind of world industrial heritage, and so the maintenance requirements are obviously very, very strict. But obviously, it's to the credit of everybody involved in the community that it is so beautifully presented. And of course, famously as well, Titus Salt was not at all keen on seeing laundry running across his streets. so that was banned. You couldn't put your laundry out the front in the streets, only in the kind of backyards. That could be an urban myth, but it's certainly one of the things that's going to ascribe to him. To no Tish Street, sadly not. No Tish or Patricias around. So sadly, go with that. But anyway, so we're heading down back down Albert Terrace now. So Titus Salt Jr. was his fifth son. But he was kind of generally regarded as the son who was most likely to inherit his father's business acumen and take on a similar role in political and public life. So Titus Jr. had an enormous impact on the provision of education in Saltaire, but sadly his less endeavour hastened his death. So Titus Jr. was passionate and vociferous in his work to organise the new Salt schools and to ensure some additional day school provision and post-13-year-olds night school facilities in the institute. He recognised the importance of improving elementary education for children under 9 years old and argued the case for a Shipley Schools Board, which was established in 1874, with himself as chairman. And with his wife Caroline, who was the daughter of Crossley's owner in Halifax, a big carpet factory and textile mill, he promoted the kindergarten method of education for young children, initiated by Frederick Froebel, a German pedagogue, a method that was to become widespread practice in English schools. Now, a lecture he organised in the kindergarten method was held in December 1877 in Victoria Hall, and a new elementary school on Albert Road opened in 1815 with 815 scholars on Monday the 20th of January 1878. So Titus Jr. was born in 1843, the youngest of 7 surviving children in the Salt family. And Titus Jr. married, as I say, Catherine Crossley, the daughter of a wealthy carpet manufacturer, in 1866, and he entered the family firm in 1863, aged 20. Within 2 years of his involvement, his elder brother William Henry and a non-family partner William Evans Glyde had retired from the business. 2 other brothers, George and Edward Salt, remained in the family firm, but their sibling Herbert Salt never entered the business and was a farmer for most of his long life. So unfortunately, the only one that didn't warrant being part of it, a true Herbert, as you might say. So it was to be Titus Jr. who entered fully into public life in the local area, and who played a major part in the final stages of the development of Saltaire and its public amenities. He went to be elected a Bradford Town Councillor in the East Ward and to chair the Shipley Schools Board, and he attended many council meetings. He initiated social events, one of which was the Conversazione, a kind of public magic lantern shows in Saltaire Club and Institute. He experimented with newly invented telephone with lines between Milnerfield, Saltsmill and later to Halifax. So it was an annual social event by that, the Conversation in Italian, between 1878 and 64. Usually held in January, held over 3 days and consisted of events for eating, dancing, entertainment, and various kind of ticket prices to enable everybody to take part in that. So all the Salt family, particularly Titus Salt and his wife, were very involved. So we had Albert Terrace, so again named after the Prince Consort there. So we're walking on the Leeds-Bradford Railway, which absorbed into the Midland Railway, and that opened on the 1st of July 1846. A line existed between Shipley and Colne in Lancashire from 1851, and this line was extended to Saltaire and Shipley in 1856. So the presence of the railway provided Salt with the means to transport both raw materials and finished goods to and from Saltaire. But throughout its building and operations in the first decade, its proximity to the Leeds-Liverpool Canal was its main access to distribution. From about 1840, the railway network gained greater importance, with the transition from short-distance horse-drawn tramways to increasingly practical, powerful steam locomotives. Trains could not only carry more than the canals, but could transport people and goods far more quickly than the walking pace of canal boats. Most of the investment of that period had previously gone into canal building, but now it's diverted into railway building. So it's worth noting that by the time Salt erected his monumental mill here, that the decline of the canal was well underway. But the location was also perfectly located by the adjoining Midland Railway to take full advantage of the power of steam to generate the richer profits. The Leeds-Liverpool Canal is the longest canal in Britain, to be built as a kind of single waterway, and it runs for 127 miles from Liverpool, through East Lancashire and the Pennines, along the edge of the Yorkshire Dales, then through Bingley and Saltaire to Leeds. The Victorian equivalent of motorway, along with the railway, the canal would have been an important factor in Salt's decision to build it. and the land that would become Saltaire was perfectly positioned, a safe but not excessive distance from the pollution of Bradford, and with rapid transport links to major industrial centres at Leeds and Liverpool, where supplies could be bought and products sold. So the first building to be constructed was Saltaire Mills, now known obviously at Salt's Mill. It was designed to manufacture textiles on a truly industrial scale. At the time it opened in 1853, it was thought to be the biggest factory in Europe. So Salt's intention was to incorporate all elements of the manufacturing process under one roof, rather than each taking place at separate locations as his previous mills in Bradford required. So employing around 3,000 workers, the mill was the very heart of Saltaire. After 1861, however, Titus Salt lived in semi-retirement, relinquishing much of the day-to-day control of his grand mill and the settlement of Saltaire to his family, particularly Titus Jr. Titus had believed in exposing his children to industry as early as possible, but none continued education beyond the age of 16. All the boys worked in the mill, learning the business at first hand, and all, except Herbert, were accepted into the partnership. Beautiful view, I think, of the industrial construction there. The question as to how much his character and religious political beliefs influenced them is a difficult one, given that Sir Titus Salt himself leaves few clues to his own personality and style of parenting. Salt's reluctance to speak in public or produce written materials left little for the historian to study in order to assess his business methods or character fully. There are a few details of how he conducted his business in Bradford, but he's thought to have enjoyed the benefits the system of production gave, but like others, he had to face the social and moral problems it presented in the new, highly urbanised society within Bradford. His attitude to factory reform, wage remuneration, and the introduction of machinery was the standard one for men of his class and his time. Wages found their own level, and mechanisation could not be artificially controlled. He was not in favour of factory legislation, limiting hours of work, and throughout the 1840s he was chairman of the Manufacturers' Opposition Committee. Nevertheless, Salt emerged from the difficult years of transition and immense growth in the trade, with his reputation as an employer unsullied. After building the magnificent mill at Saltaire and founding a village for his employees, with better housing conditions than could be found for anywhere else for workers in Bradford, he began to withdraw from public life and duties. He was beginning to be troubled by gout, which was to plague him for the rest of his life. So Salt was very much more rarely seen now in public, and for his last years he was much more involved with his charitable philanthropic activities and the completion of Saltaire. He'd become the grand old man of Bradford liberalism, and still made some political interventions in his later years. It's clear that his business, his family, and the foundation of the industrial town of Saltaire were always more important to him than the politics or the public life. The questions remain, however, as to why he founded this lasting memorial, which is now a designated World Heritage Site. A number of academics, writers and others have tried to identify his motives for doing so at the age of 50 years when the project began. This was a time when he had more than enough wealth to retire peacefully from business. Salt's motives in building Saltaire remain obscure, one says. They seem to have been a mixture of sound economics, Christian duty, and a desire to have effective control over his workforce. There were economic reasons for moving out of Bradford, and the village did provide him with an amenable, hand-picked workforce. Excuse me. Yet Salt was deeply religious and sincerely believed that by creating an environment where people could lead healthy, virtuous, godly lives, he was doing God's work. Saltaire was one of the several industrial settlements developed by great employees of labour in the mid-19th century, including Bourneville in the Midlands and Port Sunlight is it in Wales? But no, Cheshire, isn't it? A number of academics dismissed the idea this was simply an example of paternalistic philanthropy. In other words, it wasn't just to make life easy for himself. There was definitely a focus on social improvements. But as it worked so very well for productivity, you can kind of see why they grasped hold of it with such rigour. It was a company village subject to the control of an employer landlord, and it's primarily as an experiment in industrial relations that it ought to be seen, and was in fact seen by its contemporaries. So in many respects, it's not hugely different really to the feudal system, where we had a mighty landowner and then the kind of tenants kind of farming that. So it's kind of living alongside, albeit in different standards of accommodation. It's mirroring and echoing, if you like, the kind of feudal model in that respect. So is Salt's kind of personal response to the pressures urging peace and stability between capital and labour, which emerged in the aftermath of Chartism, these emergent political movements? No HGVs, well, only one or two, but obviously the streets are narrow. Salt's Mill itself is closed on a Monday and Tuesday. I filmed this on a Monday, so everything's not necessarily as open as it will be. We're about to walk down by the canal now. What's interesting to say is obviously the new mill again, and this is an accusation laid by some at the door of Salt, is that he doesn't seek to change social conditions for the masses. He kind of bypasses it by building his own new community a few miles outside the city centre. So some have suggested that his attention should have been better focused on improving the conditions in urban Bradford. He didn't do that. So that is definitely an accusation. I think it's pretty unfair to point out, but there we go. So very kooky. I think I took a nice. I very much liked the little doggy on the boat. So there's a picture after Titus Salt looking very serious, very austere. Julie's spent. Oh, good night, Julie. So nearly finished. Just a couple of minutes more of our footage. Very cute doggy there, paddling on top of there. Liked him. I thought you'd like a close-up of him. So we go and have a look at the doggy. So yeah, it is a fair comment to say that Salt didn't seek to change the economic conditions that the vast majority of people lived in, merely kind of bypassed that in creating his own industrial paradise a few miles away. So Titus Salt died on December the 29th, 1876, and the legend of his charity, compassion and business acumen had spread far and wide long before his death, travelling throughout the United Kingdom and far beyond its shores, where his name and the manufactured cloth associated with it was known and appreciated. He was known to Queen Victoria. She had sent alpaca fleeces from Windsor and was delighted with the transformation of Salt's Mill into lustrous cloth. He'd been presented with the Grand Medal of Legion of Honour in 1856 for the excellence of his products, and he was a great pioneer in a new era for the United Kingdom. His funeral procession from his home 10 miles away to his final resting place in the mausoleum at Salt's Congregational Church was to take many, many hours, and most mills were silent and many workers lined the streets to see his funeral carriage passing, numbers assembling estimated at around 100,000 people. In October 1866, Titus Jr. proposed a plan to raise a memorial to his father by building a new school of art and science to be erected on land behind the institute. He also proposed an international exhibition of Saltaire to celebrate Queen Victoria's Jubilee in 1887. And the ticket sales for the exhibition were set up, but unfortunately it made a loss, which was very embarrassing to Titus Jr. The schools ended up picking up the bill, and so that was a kind of rather unfortunate incident. But royal visitors did come along. Queen Victoria's youngest daughter Beatrice and her husband Prince Henry of Battenberg came, they said, as guests of Titus Jr. and his wife Catherine in 1887. So here we are, we're now getting kind of the last visuals of the tour, and it just gives you an opportunity, I think, just to kind of take in the sheer scale, the scope, the amount of windows, imagining the sheer amount of people that in these set of buildings. You've got 30,000 yards of cloth being produced every day. Once you see where it goes in a single story, as it then kind of goes around the bend following the Elizabeth Canal, it's probably half a mile of storage. So I didn't warehouse it, which I didn't bother to film because it's not aesthetically interesting. But hopefully it gives you a size of the scope and the ambition. We've got Newmill on one side, we've got Salts Mill on the other side. We've got Leeds Liverpool Canal, this wonderful kind of natural asset, man-made asset running right the way kind of down through the middle. It's some lovely reflection shots there. So hopefully it kind of gives you a sense of this film, and I apologise about the some of the footage at the beginning. We'll try and address that in time for going back up on YouTube. But hopefully it's given you an appreciation of Salt. He is a fascinating man. I think it's fair to say. It is definitely easy, as I say, for us to be a little bit cynical now towards the the motives. Yes, Leslie, the mill is most definitely used. It was bought by a consortium of people led by a chap called Jonathan Silver in 1986. So after Salt died and after Titus Salt basically found didn't really have the resources to run the mill, it was sold to a consortium in the sole ownership of a chap called James Roberts. Of course, Roberts Park we saw earlier on in the tour there. And so he took the ownership of that. It was Roberts that erected the statue of Salt in the park, and so forth. So the building is largely complete. So in 1986, it was taken over by a consortium of guys led by a chap called Jonathan Silver, who was an entrepreneur. He had been at art school, and I believe this is true. So all this might have been knew him, so I'm assuming it's true. He was a contemporary of David Hockney at art school, and he was very, very keen to develop it as both an arts venue but not a museum. He wanted it to be a kind of thriving community. So it's all owned by the same estate, to my knowledge. But inside you've got the David Hockney Gallery, you've got bookshops, you've got a kind of range of activities, there's lots of creative businesses located here. New Mill is the home to Health Trust, so you've got sort of health professionals on this site. So there's lots and lots of businesses and activity that are now going to take it up. So it all comes under Saltaire Estates, as far as I understand. Apologies if I've got that wrong, but it's substantially intact. The whole thing is in entirety. And what's interesting is, of course, it wasn't just the industrial complex that when it came up for consideration for UNESCO heritage qualification, that they did the entirety of the village. It wasn't simply about the mills and the transformation of the industrial environment, productivity and innovation, all these kind of things. That they also saw it as one and the same. So the streets and the housing, but also the facilities, the education facilities, the church, the sports facilities, etc. That made it, a jolly nice place to live and to work for the workers. So I do hope you have enjoyed Saltaire. That is the end of my video. So I can't run anymore. And as I say, we'll just try and tidy that up a little bit. So that if you want to look back at it, I think it's very pretty. Hopefully, visually, you found that interesting. As I say, I think, as with all these things, there are definitely parallels for our times in thinking that the ongoing debate about housing. And I think that's not just here in Yorkshire. That is everywhere, isn't it? The price of housing and how do people manage, and if people in relatively low-paid work, how do they afford to live and support their families and so forth. So, I don't think any of the issues that Titus Salt was addressing have disappeared. Context, of course, is very different. But these are, how do we, first of all, how do we live, how can we survive, but then how can we live better? I think are sort of timeless questions. So I think he's fascinating, and hopefully that kind of sat alongside, not necessarily part two, but in terms of what we talked about in Bradford City Centre, we're seeing that the buildings, the financial houses, the wool trading centre, the town hall, the kind of celebrations of that wealth, but knowing full well that the people that populated this in terms of employment were living in very reduced circumstances, that then we've got this alternative way of doing things, influenced by the same leading thought of the day in terms of how to get on and make money and utilise industrialisation to maximise profits and employment and so forth, productivity, but expressed in such a different way. So hopefully you found it interesting and rewarding, and I'm going to go on and do another one. I'm not quite sure when or what. Maybe Liston Mill will do, or maybe Bingley Fine Forest. So we're going to do some more tours from Bradford. So hope you enjoyed that. It's been a while. I've been very busy with setting up my 360 photography business. I'm now working with a professional client, which is fantastic. So that's great. So it's taking up more and more of my time. So I must admit I'm not making films as much, but I obviously still enjoy it. And thank you very much for those that continue to stick around and be interested and turn up and donate and do all those sort of things that you do. So thank you for that, everybody. Yes, we're doing the Viking Festival. Julie just nailed that down now, so I think it's going to be a Saturday and a Sunday tour, and I believe that's the 22nd, 23rd. Don't quote me on those dates, but if that's a Saturday and Sunday, is it 2 weeks from now, week and a half from now, that's what we're doing. So we're doing the march again, and then the following day we're going to do a bit of a Viking chatty tour. So we'll have a look on who's on the encampment, who's selling stuff, who's making stuff, and find some fresh and funky people to talk to. So looking forward to that. That's the weekend after next. Sorry I missed the ice trail. I was a bit tied up, but also I got the date wrong on my diary. I thought it was a week later. But also we've now got the Minster Lights. So I think what we're going to do is we've all the lights still up in York for Christmas. They call them winter lights now. So I think what we'll do is probably one day next week, weeknight, again similar sort of time, maybe 7, 8 o'clock in the evening. Pop out and have a look at the late winter lights in York, and also what we'll do is we will take in one or even possibly two playings of the Minster light installation. So hopefully plenty to be looking forward to in the coming weeks. So thank you very, very much. Thank you, Dawn. I've missed you too. And I look forward to seeing you all soon. And thank you, everybody, for making contributions financially. It helps enormously. Obviously, on this occasion, it looks like a home tour, but I still have to go there, pay the petrol, and do everything with it to get the footage. So all the costs are the same. Anyway, I will leave that to you to decide over as you see fit and normally do. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining me here today at home. As I say, we'll be out and about on the streets of York, the evening streets, look at the lights. I think will probably be our next time together. So until then, I'll bid you adieu. I'll say thank you for joining me, and wish you well for the rest of your day, whatever it is you're doing. So thank you, and goodbye.